Julian's first love had been kidnapped. The perpetrators were my enemies, specifically demanding my presence in exchange for her life. The man unhesitatingly prepared to hand over me, who was 8 months pregnant. I shielded my abdomen, crying and pleading with him. Yet, he impatiently shook off my hand. Weren't you a mercenary before? I believe you can survive. Later, I was substituted as the hostage, suspended in an abandoned factory and tortured for 3 days and nights, with no intact flesh on my body. It was only when the child in my womb was forcibly extracted alive that Julian arrived hastily with the police. Holding the child's ashes, I went to find Margaret. Over these years, I have risked life and death for Julian. The debt I owed to your Song family has been fully repaid. From now on, whether he lives or dies is none of my concern. My mind incessantly replayed the scene of the child being vivisected. The subordinate beside me, seeing that I was awake, hesitated for a moment before slowly speaking. Sister, the child didn't make it. It could have been saved originally, but Julian suddenly redirected all the doctors to examine his first love. My body stiffened, and I grabbed his arm in disbelief. My child could have been saved originally? My chest ached with a raw, bloody pain. In the past, while protecting Julian, I had sustained an injury to my uterus. Conceiving this child was truly unexpected. When I learned of the pregnancy, I was on a mission assigned by the Song family. Worried that I might not preserve the child, I planned to inform him after the mission ended. Unexpectedly, upon my return, Julian intended to deliver me to the enemies. My nose tingled with sourness. Who could have anticipated that my child survived the hail of bullets, only to be killed by his own father? I stumbled out of the ward, wanting to see the child one more time, but only encountered the child's ashes. He was only 6 months old and had not yet opened his eyes to see the world. Holding the child's ashes, I wiped away my tears and instructed the subordinate beside me, from today onward, Julian and I are completely severed. As soon as I pushed open the door, I saw Julian pressing his ear against Lydia's belly, smiling with immense happiness. Lydia, I heard it, the baby is moving. Lydia gave him a coquettish glance. All right, you've been listening for an hour, it's time to rest. Didn't your wife say she was pregnant? Aren't you going to check on her? Julian sneered. Her? She's long been a hen that can't lay eggs. She probably said that out of dissatisfaction upon learning of your pregnancy. He turned his head and only then noticed me standing at the door. Yet, not only did he feel no guilt, but he also embraced Lydia and looked at me with contempt. Didn't you say you were pregnant? Where's the child? Why not let me see? You probably don't know, but back then, I deliberately used you as a shield. Since you've already taken Lydia's place, you shouldn't expect me to give you a child. I never expected that the man I had loved for so many years was so utterly despicable. Seeing his current face, completely different from before, I only felt irony. That wound back then nearly cost me my life. When I woke up then, Julian held me tightly in his arms, apologizing repeatedly and swearing to treat me well for a lifetime. I was foolish to believe his words, risking life and death for him, returning from each mission covered in wounds. I took out the child's urn, my eyes filled with bitterness. The child is here. Upon hearing this, Julian raised an eyebrow, snatched the urn, and opened it directly. Seeing the ashes inside, Lydia screamed, fell to the ground, clutched her belly, and wailed. Julian, my belly hurts so much, quickly take away these inauspicious things. Upon hearing this, Julian's expression changed, and he directly smashed the urn onto the ground. Ashes scattered everywhere, my breath hitched, and I frantically. But I was kicked in the abdomen by Julian, curling up in pain. What do you mean, using a broken box filled with rotten ashes to pretend it's cremains? Last time, because of you, Lydia was frightened and nearly miscarried. This time, you're using this broken thing to scare Lydia again. As if still not satisfied, Julian kicked me several more times. It was only when blood flowed from beneath me that Julian stopped. With reddened eyes, I carefully gathered the child's ashes back into the urn. Our child is right here, you killed him with your own hands. You clearly knew those were my enemies, you knew what consequences I would face going there. My child didn't even get to open his eyes and see the world. I looked up, staring fixedly at him, with only hatred left in my eyes. Perhaps seeing the blood beneath me, or perhaps seeing my tears. Julian swallowed, a flash of panic in his eyes, but he still feigned composure. Don't think this will make me pity you, this is what you owe Lydia. If not for you, Lydia and I would have been living happily long ago. You deserve to suffer in her place. After saying that, he picked up Lydia, shoved me aside, and headed toward the door. My family and the Song family were old acquaintances. When my parents were killed by enemies, it was Margaret who took in the young me. I had always remembered the Song family's kindness. Thus, when Margaret proposed that I marry Julian, I agreed almost without hesitation. On the surface, I was a glamorous wife. In reality, I was more like Julian's death warrior. His smooth path to today was entirely due to me handling obstacles behind the scenes. But I didn't know that Julian had an unattainable first love. Once, while drunk, he pinned me to the bed, fiercely choking my neck, his eyes red as he questioned why I had separated them. It was then that I understood he had always hated me. Everything was merely his disguise. Shortly after Julian left, a group of black-clad bodyguards burst in and threw me a sling dress. Julian said to wear this and go to the night color bar to find him. Looking at the short skirt in front of me that barely covered the buttocks, I suddenly laughed out loud. Obediently, I changed into the sling dress. The black-clad bodyguards looked at me, their gazes not lewd, but instead full of fear. There were simply too many scars on my body, crisscrossing my back. My legs even had undried bloodstains, like a devil crawling out from hell, ready to claim lives in the next second. I walked toward the night color bar. Before opening the door, I heard lascivious laughter from inside. Julian, your wife should have a great figure, how does she feel to try? Julian's indifferent voice sounded. Utterly boring. The crowd burst into laughter. He took a sip of wine and answered unhurriedly, do as you please, daring to harm Lydia, this is her retribution. Immediately, someone flattered, it seems Lydia is the one Julian holds dear in his heart. I kicked open the private room door, narrowed my eyes, and smiled. I heard you're looking for me? The private room fell silent instantly. After a long while, someone tremblingly spoke. How is she like this? Another person licked his lips, stood up, and walked toward me. This is fine too, I like the feisty ones. I recognized him, he was quite famous. It was said he enjoyed toying with poor female students, with very perverse methods. I picked up the wine bottle on the table and smashed it directly onto that person's head. The person didn't react immediately, only when blood dripped onto the back of his hand did he suddenly yell loudly, his face contorted as he pounced toward me. You stinking bitch, daring to smash me, watch me kill you today. I made a move to counterattack, but Julian spoke unhurriedly, Evelyn, I remember there's someone in the hospital waiting for you, right? Guess where he is now? Because of his words, I was stunned for a moment, punched in the face by that person, and fell to the ground. Ignoring my own wound, I struggled to get up and walked toward Julian. What have you done to Leo? Leo was the youngest in my team and the most loyal to me. I didn't expect Julian to be so despicable, using someone close to threaten me. Julian took out a pinky finger from his pocket and placed it on the table. Seeing the special mark, my face immediately turned pale. This was Leo's finger. Dare to resist once, and next time it won't be his finger that's cut. While speaking, that person rushed over again, grabbed my hair, and dragged me to the corner. I originally wanted to treat you well, but you dared to injure me, I've changed my mind. Today, if I don't kill you, my surname isn't Zhao. After saying that, he picked up another wine bottle and smashed it directly on my head. He kicked my chest one foot after another, I dared not resist and could only instinctively curl up. After an unknown time, he seemed finally tired, picked up glass shards from the ground, and was about to stab into my artery, but was stopped by Julian. He leaned down, gently wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth. Do you know your mistake? I suddenly opened my eyes, staring at him with a fierce gaze, slowly saying, "Julian, I hate you." After saying that, I completely passed out. When I woke up again, I was already back home. Margaret had probably received the news and came specifically, comforting me, "Think positively, it's okay. You're still young, you'll conceive again in the future." As if thinking of something, Margaret frowned. "As for that Lydia, don't mind her, she's just someone unworthy of the stage. It's normal for men to have a few playthings outside. In a few years, his heart will return to the family, and he'll appreciate your goodness." Saying that, she took out a document from her pocket and handed it to me. "The last mission isn't finished yet, there's a new one too, so handle them together. No rush, you can rest for a few days before departing." I suddenly burst into laughter, feeling unworthy for my past self. Truly mother and son, exactly alike. I tore the document in my hand to shreds and blew the whistle hanging on my chest. In the next second, a large kite crashed through the window and flew onto my shoulder. Looking at the already terrified Margaret, I coldly said, "Over these years, what I've done for your son family has far exceeded the kindness you showed me back then. From now on, I have no relation to the Song family or Julian." I turned and walked outside. Margaret still wanted to chase after me but was blocked by the large kite on my shoulder. Outside the door, several armored vehicles were already waiting for me. Seeing me come out, they uniformly bowed toward me. "Welcome back, young miss." I nodded to everyone and asked, "Where is Leo? Is he okay?" Leo ran out from the end of the team, looking at me with a face full of guilt. "Big sister, I'm fine, it's all my fault for being useless, causing you to suffer." Looking at the gauze wrapped around his hand, a flash of guilt also appeared in my eyes. "No, it's I who have harmed you. Over these years following me, you've suffered. From today onward, I won't let you die in vain for the Song family anymore." After saying that, as everyone was about to board the vehicles, Margaret chased out. Her hair was extremely disheveled, and her hands had wounds pecked by the large kite. She looked at me with a face full of resentment and discontentedly said, "Evelyn, if not for me back then, you would have died long ago. Is this how you repay my kindness?" I sneered, rolling up my sleeve. "Over these years, for your Song family, I've nearly died countless times. If you have even a shred of conscience, don't block me anymore." Seeing the scars on my arm, a flash of guilt appeared in Margaret's eyes. Seeing that toughness wouldn't work, she had to soften her approach. Her face piled up with an ingratiating smile, and her tone softened a bit. "Evelyn, look at you, why be so impulsive? We're all family, no overnight grudges. Isn't this for your own good? With your conditions, probably only Julian won't disdain you. If you can't marry, won't you end up alone in old age?" Leo immediately felt dissatisfied. "You old hag, what are you saying? With us accompanying her, how could big sister be lonely?" Others also defended me. "Exactly, what does it have to do with you? We've tolerated your Song family for a long time. If you dare say one more word, watch out, we won't be polite." Seeing my cold expression, Margaret stamped her foot, her eyes full of venom. "Evelyn, you're deliberately opposing me, aren't you?" I drew the dagger from my leg and threw it toward Margaret. The dagger flew past her ear, cutting off a strand of her hair, and I looked at Margaret with a playful expression. "Yes, so what? It's your Song family that can't do without me, not me without your Song family." Margaret was scared and collapsed to the ground, unable to speak for a long time. Seeing this, I boarded the armored vehicle. As the vehicle was about to depart, Julian's voice sounded from the side. "What are you all gathered here making a fuss about?" Seeing Julian return, Margaret acted as if she found a lifesaver, stumbling to her feet, running to Julian's side, pointing at my face. "Julian, you're finally back, you have to stand up for Mom. Your wife is rebelling." Julian, seeing this situation for the first time, frowned and stared at the several armored vehicles in front. "Evelyn, what are you doing calling so many people to gather at the door? Don't make a fool of yourself, quickly disperse this group." I toyed with the dagger in my hand, looking at Julian with a half-smile. "Disperse? Why disperse?" I called these people over, of course, to prepare to leave. Julian's brows furrowed tighter. Leave? Where are you going on a mission? I twirled the dagger and shook my head. Not on a mission, I'm leaving the Song family and never coming back. Julian's face darkened. Evelyn, what madness are you throwing? I just gave you a little lesson, and you're making such a fuss? I retorted without yielding. Julian, I'm not messing with you. I married you back then only out of gratitude to the Song family, but you Song family people are all ungrateful wretches. The debt is repaid, and it's time for me to leave. Hearing my words, Julian seemed somewhat helpless. Evelyn, what do you want? Except for a child, which I can't give you, I can try to satisfy anything else. After accepting the gift, be obedient and stop making trouble. He walked over, wanting to hold my hand, but I shook it off. I tilted my head and hooked a smile. If I say I want your life? Julian narrowed his eyes, scrutinizing me carefully. Evelyn, jokes should be in moderation, making too much noise isn't fun. I ignored his words and pointed to the house behind him. Julian, I prepared a surprise for you in the cabinet of your study, you should go see the surprise first. After saying that, I signaled to my subordinates. Let's go. Seeing the armored vehicles really starting, Julian shouted discontentedly behind me, Evelyn, if you really leave, don't ever come back. No one paid attention to his words. Julian snapped the black card in his hand and threw it to the ground, turning to enter the house. He went to the study and, as I said, found a file bag in the cabinet. For some reason, his heart vaguely felt uneasy. He opened the file bag, and several photos fell to the ground. Picking them up, they were intimate photos of Lydia with another man. There was also a voice recorder in the file bag. Julian pressed the button, and Lydia's voice came from the recorder. Good brother, will we really not be discovered doing this? Responding to her was a strange man. Don't you want to become Julian's wife? The Song family is so rich, after becoming Julian's wife, neither of us will worry about food and drink. Lydia seemed somewhat worried. But what if Julian discovers the child in my belly isn't his? The man smiled. Then find an opportunity for an accidental miscarriage, that way, Julian not only won't discover, but will also feel guilty toward you, right? Lydia was still hesitant. But this is our first child after all. The man comforted her, it's okay, we're still young and won't worry about raising more in the future. Lydia then relaxed. All right then, good brother, you're still the smart one. When I become Julian's wife, I definitely won't forget you. Then, unbearable sounds came from the recorder. Julian turned off the recorder, veins bulging on his neck, his fingertips faintly whitening from excessive force. The child in Lydia's belly wasn't his, she dared to deceive him. He had treated her as his first love, even harming Evelyn multiple times for her sake, yet she had been deceiving him all along. Did she deserve him? She had betrayed his trust in her. Emotions like anger, regret, and unwillingness flooded him like surging tides. He fiercely smashed the things in his hand to the ground, shaking the ornaments in the study, then turned and rushed out the door, heading straight to the hospital. In the hospital, the pungent smell of disinfectant filled the air. Lydia was lazily lying on the hospital bed, one hand holding cut fruit, the other gently stroking her protruding abdomen, with a content expression. Seeing Julian barge in aggressively, her eyes first panicked, but then she switched to a sweet smile, coquettishly saying, Julian, why are you here? Do you miss me and the baby? Julian strode to the bedside, grabbing Lydia's wrist with such force that she couldn't help but cry out in pain. His gaze was ice-cold like a poisoned blade, questioning, Lydia, whose child is in your belly exactly? Lydia's face instantly turned as pale as paper. She struggled desperately to shake off Julian's hand, her voice carrying unconcealable fear. Julian, what are you saying? I don't understand. The baby is yours, of course. Are you too tired and hallucinating? Stop pretending. Julian was furious, veins bulging at his neck, pulling out photos from his pocket and slamming them onto Lydia. How do you explain these photos? Do you think I'm a fool, that I'm blind? Julian repeated once more. Explain clearly, whose child is it? Lydia clutched the bed corner and shrank back, her voice trembling with panic. These photos are synthesized. It must be that bitch Evelyn deliberately framing me. She's always jealous of us, wanting to destroy our relationship. Framing? Julian grabbed the voice recorder and pressed play. Lydia's soft gasps and conspiratorial dialogue exploded in the ward. Good brother, what if Julian discovers the child in my belly isn't his? After playback ended, Julian stared coldly at her. Is this forged too? Impossible. Lydia screamed, grabbing for the recorder, tears surging out. This is fake, Julian, you can't just believe her words. I'm the one who loves you the most. I did all this because I was too afraid of losing you. You venomous bitch. Julian smashed the recorder hard onto Lydia's face, the metal shell scraping her cheek. If not for you, how would Evelyn have been sent to the enemy camp? How would she have suffered so many injuries? He grabbed Lydia's hair and yanked her up from the bed. Lydia's scalp tingled from the pull, yet she suddenly let out a sharp laugh. Julian, do you think you're clean? Which of those scars on Evelyn's body wasn't from shielding you? The time her uterus was injured, the bullet was originally meant to pierce her heart. Her gaze turned sinister. You keep saying you love me, yet you let her trade her life for your safety time and again, now you blame me? Julian's hand suddenly loosened, and Lydia fell back onto the bed. What did you say? His voice trembled unconsciously. I said you're the executioner. Lydia sat up, sneering repeatedly. Evelyn was indeed pregnant, I've seen the doctor's examination report. But you? You called her a hen that can't lay eggs and redirected all the doctors saving her child. She approached Julian, her eyes full of mockery. How does it feel to kill your own flesh and blood with your own hands? Impossible. Julian staggered back, bumping into the bedside table. The doctor clearly said she couldn't get pregnant. Lydia grabbed a pillow and threw it at him. That's because you didn't want to believe she was pregnant at all, you feared that with a child, she wouldn't need a useless person like you anymore. Julian rushed out like a madman, grabbing a passing doctor at the nurse station. Was the female patient who came with me before pregnant? Her child, could it have been saved? The young doctor was frightened by his appearance, nodding tremblingly. At that time, the fetus was stable, if surgery was timely. Before finishing, Julian had rushed into the stairwell, punching the wall hard, blood flowing through his fingers. Lydia hadn't lied, Evelyn was really pregnant, and he had killed his own child with his own hands. He returned to the ward dejectedly. Lydia was leisurely applying nail polish. Believe it now? But it's too late, your child has long turned to ashes. Julian suddenly turned to the doctor who followed in and roared. Immediately abort this bastard for me. You dare. Lydia protected her belly, screaming. This is Vincent's child, if you touch a finger on him, the Zhao family will make your Song family disappear completely. The gentleness on her face had long vanished. Julian, do you think I really love you? You're just my stepping stone to rise. Julian looked at this unfamiliar woman before him, feeling dizzy. The person he once regarded as his first love was now more terrifying than a devil, while the one who truly loved him had been pushed into the abyss by his own hands. Lydia took out her phone and dialed Vincent's number, her voice tearful. Vincent, come save me quickly. Julian wants to harm our child. She deliberately put the phone on speaker, letting Julian clearly hear the roar from the other end. In less than half an hour, Vincent burst into the ward aggressively with a group of bodyguards. He glanced at Julian's ashen face and sneered. Julian, what skill is bullying a woman? Our Lydia can be considered your first love, right? And Evelyn? Hand her over, and we'll let bygones be bygones. Who do you think you are? Julian stepped forward and grabbed Vincent's collar. Daring to scheme against me and still wanting Evelyn? Dream on. Vincent laughed a few times. Julian, don't think the Song family is so great. Without Evelyn, what is your Song family? Evelyn is now a thorn in my side. As long as she's alive, I won't stop. You can protect her for a while, but can you protect her forever? This sentence completely enraged Julian. He swung his fist at Vincent, roaring. You dare touch her and see. From today onward, the Zhao group belongs to the Song family. The bodyguards Vincent brought wanted to step forward but were blocked by the Song family bodyguards who arrived upon hearing the news. The scene was chaotic. Under the absolute strength disparity, Vincent was beaten black and blue. Julian released him, wiped the blood from his hands, and said coldly. Everyone listen up, anyone who touches Evelyn is an enemy of the entire Song family. That night, Julian mobilized the family forces to forcibly acquire the Zhao group. However, this also greatly damaged the Song family's vitality, but Julian didn't care, single-mindedly wanting to vent for me. After handling everything, Julian returned to the empty home. He walked into the study, opened past photo albums, all filled with photos with Evelyn. In the photos, Evelyn always smiled brightly, her eyes full of trust and love for him. He remembered once, during a mission, she was ambushed and injured in multiple places. At that time, holding the unconscious Evelyn, he was heartbroken and speechless, swearing to protect her for a lifetime. But from when did his vows turn into lies? And that time Evelyn was injured on a mission and hospitalized, he guarded the bedside day and night, holding her hand and saying, Don't take risks anymore, I just want you safe. Evelyn smiled and comforted him. As long as you're fine, anything I do is worth it. Thinking back now, those warm scenes hammered his heart like heavy blows. He recalled how Evelyn would silently prepare everything for him before each mission, how even when injured, she would endure pain to cook for him, and the grievance and disappointment in her eyes when misunderstood by him. He frantically searched every corner of the home, hoping to find a trace left by Evelyn. In the bedside table drawer, he found a diary. February 16th, I discovered I'm pregnant, both happy and afraid. The mission isn't over yet. When I return safely, I'll tell Julian this good news. I hope our baby can grow up healthy and happy. It was Evelyn's handwriting. Julian's hand holding the diary trembled uncontrollably, tears dripping onto the pages. So she had always been anticipating this child's arrival. And he had destroyed it all with his own hands. From that day on, Julian began frantically searching for my whereabouts. He mobilized all his connections and resources, not missing any clue. He went to every place Evelyn had been, asking everyone who might know her. Have you seen Evelyn? This phrase became his mantra. Some said they saw her training with a group, others saw her commanding operations, but every time he arrived, he could only see a distant retreating figure. After leaving the Song family, I led my brothers to set up camp in an abandoned factory in the suburbs. Every morning at 5, a sharp whistle pierced the sky. All present. 3-kilometer cross-country, last 5 add push-ups. Holding a megaphone, I stood in the center of the training ground, watching the brothers quickly form ranks. Leo rubbed his eyes and rushed out from the barracks, shouting while running. Big sister. I was cleaning guns until midnight yesterday, can you make an exception? No. I interrupted mercilessly. On the battlefield, enemies won't care how late you were busy yesterday. After training ended, smoke rose from the temporarily built stove. Big sister, taste my newly learned skill. Leo approached with a plate of charred chicken wings. Before, in the Song family kitchen, the master wouldn't let me touch the stove, saying I'd blow up the kitchen. With your level, not blowing yourself up is fortunate. Victor took the chicken wings, bit one, and immediately spit it out, chugging water. Is this chicken wings or charcoal? Get lost. Leo flushed red and snatched the plate. Big sister, judge fairly. I smiled and patted his shoulder. Next time I'll teach you, start with chopping vegetables. Such days were simple and fulfilling. Until one day, while procuring supplies in town, a young man in a custom suit suddenly blocked my path. Sister Evelyn. I've finally found you. I vigilantly stepped back half a step, hand reaching for the gun at my waist. Who are you? I'm called Alexander. He removed his sunglasses, revealing a refined face. I've seen your combat videos, I admire you so much. I want to join your corps. We don't need vases here. I sneered and turned to leave. But he persistently followed behind. I can endure hardship. I work out 3 hours a day and can fly planes. Can fly planes? Then fly away in one. I didn't look back. Don't. He chased breathlessly. I know you lack supplies, my family has plenty of money. I can. We don't lack spineless people who kneel to earn money. I stopped, my gaze ice cold. The corps needs warriors who can stand and fight desperately. Unexpectedly, the next day, he really appeared at the camp entrance in camouflage. I'll start from the bottom. He stuffed his designer watch into his pocket. Cleaning, feeding pigs, fixing toilets, anything. Leo hesitated. Big sister, why not keep him and see? I sighed helplessly. All right then, everything follows my command. Days passed like this. Until during a mission escorting medicine, we were ambushed. Ambush. Disperse. I shouted, directing the brothers to counterattack, but neglected behind me. Careful. Alexander suddenly pounced over, knocking me to the ground. A bullet grazed his shoulder and flew past, sparking on the ground. He rolled over, drew his gun, movements fluid, eliminating 3 enemies in the blink of an eye. Dare to hurt her, die. He stood in front of me, covered in blood, his gaze chillingly cold. After the battle, watching him skillfully treat the wound, I finally couldn't help asking. Who exactly are you? He chuckled lightly, tearing his shirt to bandage his arm. Former captain of the International Special Forces Night Shadow. So your previous week appearance was all an act? I frowned. How to approach you without acting? He blinked. After all, directly saying I'm a soldier king, can I join, sounds too much like a scam. I looked at him vigilantly. What exactly is your purpose? Unexpectedly, he just smiled faintly. I came for you, you saved me once. Just as I was about to answer, Julian suddenly appeared at the camp entrance, unshaven, his eyes full of fatigue and guilt. Evelyn, I was wrong, please give me a chance to make amends. Alexander suddenly put his arm around my shoulders. Julian, Evelyn now has someone protecting her, you should go back. I'm talking to Evelyn, it's not your turn to interrupt. Julian clenched his fists. Is that so? Alexander raised an eyebrow. Need I remind you who harmed her almost to death? Enough. You wait aside, I'll explain things clearly later. I pushed Alexander away, looking at Julian. Julian, don't use apologies as an excuse. When you pushed me into the enemy camp back then, you should have thought of today. About the child. Don't bring up the child. I interrupted him, my voice trembling. When you killed our child with your own hands, you already cut off all possibilities. I was deceived by Lydia then. Now I know I was wrong. The mistake isn't some person, it's that you never loved me. I took a deep breath. Before, I fought desperately for you because of gratitude, now I live for myself because I'm awake. Between us, it ends here. But Julian refused to leave, guarding outside the camp every day. Sometimes sending osmanthus cakes I loved, sometimes silently helping repair the fence. Alexander always threw the things out with a cold face. Julian, persistent pestering isn't gentlemanly. Evelyn, I know you still hate me. Julian shouted through the wire fence. But let me do something, otherwise, I can't forgive myself in this lifetime. The change occurred during an assault on an enemy stronghold. We were ambushed, dense bullets coming like raindrops. Quickly withdraw. I shouted, covering the brothers' retreat, but didn't notice the enemy on the side. Careful. Julian suddenly rushed out, knocking me to the ground. A bullet pierced his chest, blood gushing out. Why? I looked at his eyes gradually losing luster. Being able to shield you once more, it's worth it. He laboriously raised his hand. Evelyn, sorry, live well. Alexander rushed over, shooting the enemy dead with one shot. Are you okay? I gazed at Julian's body, a wave of sourness rising in my heart. The person I once loved deeply now bid farewell in this way. I personally buried Julian. That day it rained heavily. Alexander held an umbrella for me and asked, "Do you still love him?" I gazed at the distant green mountains and said softly, "I loved him once, but now, I love my free self more." After burying Julian, I led the corps to continue forward. Alexander always accompanied me. Together we opened new strongholds and helped trap civilians. The road ahead is long. I finally found my own direction, carrying hope and courage, stepping toward a new life journey.